Check 1 2. Check 1 2. Okay, I got feed coming.
Hey, good afternoon. Is the mic on? Perfect. I'm assuming it's on. Thank you for coming to our final session of the day. I hope you guys are having a great day so far. This is the session called Brownfield Redevelopment, Finding Strength in Your Surrounding. So if you're in the wrong place, you're kind of stuck here now. My name is Stephen Yu. I'm one of the APPI committee members who helps conference committee members, and I'm here today to introduce Patrick Wetter from B&A Group and Candice Bannock of the town of Cochrane. So without further ado, I guess I'll leave it up to you guys.
So first off, just thank you for coming to the session. I'm going to start the presentation, just kind of set the stage a bit, and then Patrick will take over. So I really hope that you're all here because of the riveting session description and not because we're the only hour session and the other two are an hour and a half right before the banquet. So we'll keep you entertained for the next hour anyway. So in this presentation, we are going to be discussing the first steps in the redevelopment of a former gravel pit, basically adjacent to Cochrane's downtown area. So we'll share with you the development of the Greystone Area Structure Plan, as well as the non-statutory Neighbourhood Plan that came next in the process. So as I mentioned, I'm just going to start, I'm going to introduce you to the town. Contrary to what some may believe, there is a lot more going on in Cochrane than just McKay's ice cream. So I'm just going to, like I said, introduce you to the town, kind of tell you about where the town was at just before and when this plan came forward, talk about some of the challenges we were facing, introduce the lands, and then the surrounding area to you. And from there, Patrick will take it over, explain how the plan came to be, how it was influenced, and how it addressed the challenges that I'm going to talk about at the start. We're going to end the presentation with a few lessons learned, and then basically how we've been able to celebrate strength through this process. So, looking first at Cochrane, so you can see where we are in Fort McMurray, and then where Cochrane is down in the south. So we are just located immediately west of the city of Calgary. We do have a population of roughly 30,000 people and have consistently been one of the top growing communities within Canada for the last number of years. Cochrane alone between 2011 and 2016 grew by just about 50%. So just those 4 years, or 5 years, I suppose, massive growth happening. Cochrane is known for its manufacturing industries. We do have a sawmill and gravel pits within our urban boundary, among many other industries. Cochrane is also known for its thriving tech sector, providing a home probably most notably to Garmin, as well as several other tech companies. Despite the close proximity to Calgary, Cochrane also does have a strong retail and service industry. A significant portion of the retail opportunities in the town did come after the remediation and redevelopment of the former Domtar site. So that redevelopment did transform roughly 45 acres immediately adjacent to Cochrane's historic downtown and allowed for the development of big box and smaller scale retail right in our downtown. So that was actually a really neat project, being able to bring that stuff to our downtown, because normally that kind of stuff is developed at your outer edges. So this is the town on the map there. So most notably, we do have Highway 1A running out to Banff and then through over to Calgary. Also Highway 22 coming from the north straight through the middle of town. So these are both under provincial jurisdiction. We are still considered a town. We also have the Bow River. It's kind of hard to see now. Oh, thank you. See the Bow River coming through town. And then also the CP Mainline Railway, also running through our community as well. And then on this map, you will see the downtown locations. We have our historic downtown kind of up in this location, that new Domtar site, the retail that I mentioned here. And then we're going to be kind of working in this area with this redevelopment plan now. So you can see how it all connects with our existing downtown area. So then, as I just mentioned, so there's the Domtar area that was redeveloped, and then this is our plan area that we're going to be talking about today. So you can see it's a pretty strategic location right between our downtown as well as the Bow River. So this is the Greystone Area Structure Plan area. So it's roughly 300 acres, again, sandwiched between the downtown and the Bow River. The driving force behind this area structure plan coming forward was the completion or mining out of that Burnco gravel pit that you see right in the middle. The area structure plan area also does include a portion of our Spray Lake sawmill lands, you can see here. This is the actual sawmill itself. This is their storage area. So it does take in the storage area. And then several other parcels that I'm going to talk a little bit more to later. Of importance to note also on this map, you will see this is the adjacent community called Riverview. We're going to talk about them a little bit. I mentioned the sawmill already, and then the new downtown and the existing retail, and also some industrial just immediately north of this plan area as well. We are currently also constructing a new bridge over the Bow River. This has been a massive project for the town. It's just the completion is coming. We're on time, on schedule, so that's really good. And then immediately south of the Bow River, you just have more residential across. So this, as I mentioned, became the Greystone Neighbourhood Plan. So now just talking a little bit about the site itself and its history. It did function as a gravel extraction operation since the 1940s. It was acquired by Burnco in the 70s. Gravel pit extraction was completed in 2015, and they did continue to store the gravel until it was all distributed through 2018. So the driving force of the redevelopment was the gravel pit. However, the town of Cochrane did not want the site planned in isolation from the surrounding lands. And the town did request that the area structure plan covered that entire area, not just the gravel pit lands. However, as a follow-up, a more detailed neighborhood plan could come forward that would just focus on those gravel pit lands themselves. So at this point, Burnco, or Burns West, I'll explain that in a minute, was ready to move forward to the next stage of redevelopment. So now we're just going to meet the main players in the project. So Burns West is another arm of the same parent company that Burnco is part of. So Burnco covers the gravel operations, and then the land will usually transfer over to Burns West, who develops and manages the land. The main focus has been retail, office, and industrial. And again, they oversee the reclamation and redevelopment of exhausted Burnco gravel pits. So with that gravel extraction complete, they were ready to move forward with their new infill development. The town did work with Burns West. They were very open that that their gravel pit was coming up and that they would be moving forward with redevelopment. So this was not a surprise in any way. We did require the area structure plan, like I'd mentioned, to be completed for the whole area, not just the gravel pit itself. Some just context about the town itself. So we have about 300 staff working for the town. Again, we're just highlighting the quick growth here. Between 2010 and 2018, we did process over 5,000 building permits, and then the population increased over 15,000 in the 10-year span from 2009 to 2019. Next, so B&A Planning Group, they were also instrumental in this. So Burns West did approach B&A to design the community for their Cochrane land holding. In terms of the firm context of B&A, they are Western Canada's largest urban planning firm. They provided 30 years of consulting services. Clients include landowners, developers, municipalities, and the aggregate and energy industries. They have completed multiple projects in Cochrane. We actually work with them probably more than any other firm in town, so we have a really good working relationship with them as well. So now we're going to move on to some of the challenges that we are facing. So kind of challenges the town is facing, as well as challenges to the plan early in the process that had to be worked through as well. And I must be clear by this slide, the intent behind this slide was not to imply that our town council was a challenge, more so that we're going to talk about the challenges that council was facing. Just being very clear about that for any of you councillors watching. So issues town council was facing, as I had mentioned, the town had grown very quickly. Infrastructure, keeping up with development, I think everyone in this room could probably understand that. Particularly roads and traffic infrastructure for us. So at the high level, like I mentioned, we have the 22-1A intersection, which is all under provincial jurisdiction, has been on and off the budget for years. Currently on, but I guess we'll see what late October brings, so hoping for that. It's technically failed some years ago, and the upgrade of that will be very important for the town. Also looking forward, Highway 22 really does need to be twinned as well. Traffic jams in town get out of control sometimes, and especially because also, like I'd mentioned, we have the main line CP rail going through. So when traffic, depending on the time of day and the day of week, and then if the train's coming through, traffic can be a nightmare. And also there's some needed upgrades to town roads as well. It's not just the provincial highways, I don't want to say that. So it's become a very understandable but also common complaint from residents. How can we possibly add more growth and keep growing and approve more developments when infrastructure is already failing? So this is the common public sentiment when new development's proposed. And it does put council in a bit of a tough spot because we also do need the new development to help pay towards offsite levies and provide other road upgrades as well through their projects. So it's the catch-22 that, again, I'm sure a lot of you find yourselves in. Also, despite having the manufacturing and tech sectors represented that I talked about, there's a critical shortage of vacant or new business park lands or light industrial type lands in the town. We have the companies there now, but they need to expand, and currently they can't. There is nowhere for them to go right now. We can't afford to lose the existing industry in town, but that lacking light industrial land supply is a very real concern for us. And then also knowing the importance of the location of this property, both in its size and its location. Everyone at the town of Cochrane, from administration right through to council, understood the value of this land, and we knew we had to get this right. And I think that was the most important thing through this whole process. Everyone understood the importance. One last thing that we were grappling with a bit was how to get council input sooner. A lot of times you can spend a year going through an area structure plan process. You get to council, you find out maybe you missed the mark a little bit. Maybe they had a different vision for this land than you did. And you'd probably want to know that before the second or third reading. So how can this be addressed earlier in the process? And this is another thing. Meeting that challenge, we'll talk about that a little bit later. Another challenge was the active facilities and operations. So while the gravel pit had completed its operations and was proposed to move forward with its redevelopment, there were several other facilities and operations within the ASP site that are active and are not planning on relocating or closing anytime in the near future. So specifically, we had existing recreational uses. So that includes the Spray Lakes Family Sports Center. So this is the town's main recreational complex. This is hockey rink, swimming pool, curling rink, gym, walking tracks. Basically, the vast majority of municipal recreation facilities, that is where they are. We just last year added the pool and the curling rink, so this is not going anywhere anytime soon. In addition, we have the Bow River's Edge Campground. So that is here. They just recently, it's been on operation for years, but they've just recently subdivided it out and actually purchased the property. So you also know that's not going anywhere anytime soon either. It is also our only campground within the town. On the industrial side, there is an existing Cardlock gas station repair shop. Again, not proposed to move anywhere anytime soon. The sawmill. So this, like I mentioned, is just, at this point, their storage yard, not the actual active sawmill. But again, they're not planning on moving. I'm sure at some point they will. I'm sure it's a bit of a, it's a bit of trouble driving their log trucks in and out of an area adjacent to our downtown. But for now, they are staying where they are. As well, road maintenance yard in this location here. So this is actually owned by Rocky View County, leased out to Volker Steven, who does our highway maintenance for the province. That is their yard. Again, no plans to move anytime soon. And then finally, the Town of Cochrane Sanitary Transfer Station here. So this is tied to our sanitary main to Calgary. We're not moving that anytime soon. So we had to plan for a site that included active industrial and recreational sites within it, and had to consider how certain areas of that could redevelop while having regard for the existing and continuing uses that all varied in scale, in intensity, and then obviously in use. Next challenge, kind of tied to that last one, is the multiple landowners. So not only did we have the different uses, we had different owners. There's 8 landowners within the planned area, including Rocky View County and the Town of Cochrane. So all these different owners have different interests, different long-term and short-term plans for their lands and their operations on those lands. So how do you manage all these interests and visions and expectations of all these landowners while some are choosing to move forward with redevelopment now and some are not? How do you create one overall vision to move forward? And then finally on the challenge side, we had some vocal and organized opposition to this plan. So I had mentioned to you the Riverview community that is immediately adjacent to the planned lands. They have a community association, and I can say that they are the most established and mobilized community association that we have in town. They had concerns with the redevelopment right from the start. So mainly, they were concerned how compatible any redevelopment would be with their existing community. They are developed on a private golf course, so they have lots of green space. Granted, it is a golf course, but that's how they view this, as open space, green space. They are a low-density, single-family home community. They had concerns with traffic generation in the area and what would happen to kind of their quiet community, and also concerned that that traffic would shortcut through their community as redevelop happened. So specifically, they do have their main Riverview Drive that does go through the community, and that was their main concern, that traffic would be shortcutting rather than going up Riverview Drive, or River Avenue, sorry. The Community Association was also concerned with potential health impacts that could result from developing residential in proximity to those sawmill lands. In addition, there's some overall lacking trust from them with development, with developers, and actually with the town as a whole. There was the former driving range for that golf course. It had been redeveloped by the owner of the golf course to a condo site, kind of between 2007, 2011. They were very upset and disappointed with this. Since that time, they have carried some pretty open mistrust for developers and for the town for allowing that development to happen in the first place. So that's kind of where we're at with them just starting this application alone. Public engagement for the project had started before the area structure plan application did come forward. The Riverview Community Association had met with all potential council and mayoral candidates before the 2007 municipal election. They asked them very specific questions about the Greystone plan. Should the town buy that existing road maintenance yard owned by Rocky View County and turn it into a large park? Should densities be lowered in Greystone? Things like that. All while the people running probably didn't even know many of the details of this plan yet. So they're kind of caught off guard, I think, with the questioning. And then later, those answers came back during the presentation at the public hearing. The Community Association reminded council of their answers to these questions before they were even councillors. Then during the file review, the Community Association did contact some of the external circulation agencies themselves. They reached out to Alberta Health Services, the Cochrane Fire Department. They really wanted to question and ensure that all potential health and safety impacts of the development had been considered, while still claiming that the development could cause health issues, whether it be air quality, noise, increased fire risks. So this led to a lot of increased engagement with them, the town, the referral agencies, as well as BNA and the developer. The Community Association also requested copies of the technical documents for their own analysis. So again, this is kind of that lacking trust in town review. The developer did willingly share them with them, so including the traffic impact assessment. So even without technical training, the Community Association argued the validity of the TIA. They did not think the scope was broad or wide enough. It should include more intersections around town. Multi-page letters of concern were submitted over the course of the application. Many meetings were held with the Community Association by both the town and BNA. Over things like town process, explaining their opportunities to be involved and engaged, how the proposed plan aligned with the town's existing plans, the MDP, the Parks Open Space Master Plan, how densities were calculated. But even though that happened, there would still be letters to the editor. You'd still be responding to all the emails between the Community Association and the referral agencies. Public hearing presentations, like normally we limit them to 5 minutes. Unless you're speaking on behalf of a group, you can have a little bit longer, but they went well over an hour. So it's fair to say hundreds of hours were spent collectively between the town administration, the developer, and then as well as their consultant BNA, and the referral agencies meeting with or responding to the Community Association in an attempt to resolve their concerns. And we will speak to this in the plan, how we did manage to mitigate some of their concerns through the plan. The unfortunate part, though, too, was that several members of the community did contact the town stating that they were in favor of the redevelopment, and the Community Association didn't speak on their behalf. But yet, when it came to the public hearing, nobody actually wanted to stand up after the hour-long talk from the Community Association and actually say that. So how do you actually ensure that all citizens are getting equal representation to whether to oppose or speak in favor of a plan? This was something that we had a lot of issues with. Finally, we're going to move on to the strengths. So how are we actually going to meet some of this? So in terms of council strength, I had mentioned we had the issue of how do we actually get engagement from council earlier in the process while not doing anything that we shouldn't be by bringing council into an application while an application's in process. So one innovative thing Cochrane has done, we've incorporated into our planning process this item called the Community Enhancement Evaluation. So this was put in place shortly before the Greystone application was made and has been used on all area structure plan, neighborhood plan, and large-scale land use amendments since then. So this is a pre-application step that has applicants respond to a number of questions, and they rate their own draft plan based on those items. The questions relate to items and community characteristics that council wishes to see in future applications. It relates to 5 planning principles: responsible growth management, social well-being, environmental stewardship, economic vitality, and community engagement. Often the public will contact council or the mayor, voicing their concerns on a project, and a lot of times council doesn't even know about the project yet. So this This was a way to ensure that council would be updated on a plan at the same time as the public. And that put council in a more informed position before the application's even made. I guess I probably didn't explain that very well. They answer the questions and then they come to council as a delegation and present their draft plan to council before it is a formal application. We get council's feedback at that point. So if there are things that are really important to council in terms of vision or leading principles, we know those up front and we can ensure that the developer is meeting those as we move through the plan process. This was put in place, like I said, to make sure that everyone's aware of the plan at the same time and bring efficiencies to the process. So we're not wasting time, arguing over a vision or a principle for a year and then get to council and find out that maybe we were both wrong. Maybe that's not what council wanted. We know this ahead of time now and we can plan accordingly. So I'm going to quit blabbering here and hand it over to Patrick. And I know he's going to cover this in his presentation, but really on behalf of the town, I really wanted to give kudos to BNA and their developer. This was the most robust public engagement that we have ever seen on a project in the town. And he's going to talk about that, but I know at the end of the day, it was one of the definite strengths of this plan and definitely helped in its success. So I just wanted to end with that. I'll leave these for you.
Well, thanks so much, Candace. That was really appreciative remarks about our public engagement. So I'll go through the rest of the strengths that we wanted to point out for you all as part of this project. So first is surrounding strengths. So we wanted to go forward and look at the surroundings and see how we could, rather than turning our backs to them or isolating them, or we wanted to see how we could integrate them into the project and create synergies, create connection. So as we mentioned, we have the Riverview community, we have the Bow River, the recreation center that Candace talked about, the campground, the downtown, and the commercial industrial. So we went and thought, well, how do we put like uses next to each other to start? So you can see here where we put the residential next to residential, and the employment next to the commercial industrial, that's there. Now, in between all that was the commercial piece, which kind of linked the two together really nice, because those living in those houses in the residential area would, of course, do some shopping there perhaps. People who were employed in the future business park would go off and have their lunch in the commercial area. And then as well with the rec center, after a game, you might go for a beer or go get your kid a slushie or something like that nature. So we're seeing these synergies starting to happen. And then with the play fields, that worked really nice because it sort of almost augmented the open space next to the campground, as well being the outside element of the rec center. So you have your indoor sports in the rec center and your outdoor sports at the play fields. So we really wanted to create this synergy and really nice dynamic between all the existing uses. The other aspect I wanted to say just about the residential is there was some interest in Rocky View County as well as the Spray Lake Sawmill that sometime in the future they were interested in potentially putting residential on their land. So that would again continue that synergy between and complementary use between the residential piece we're proposing. We also wanted to ensure an attractive interface between the uses. And then we wanted to enhance and connect all these uses together through a street network that were made up of excuse me, regional pathways, sidewalks, roads, as well as future transit. Now we just want to talk a little bit about the developer strengths. So developers Burns West, as mentioned, and they're a really kind of fun client to work with. A lot of clients are either very specific about they want, or have or don't really have an idea. Like it's someone, they were in the middle, which was kind of nice. They were, on one hand, very knowledgeable and experienced when it came to gravel pit redevelopment. They're also experienced in business and industrial, but they weren't as experienced with commercial or residential. So they had a lot of questions about and wanted to explore how to diversify their portfolio at the end of the day. So they selected what I would say was a quite knowledgeable team. Not only was it BNA, but we had a few, SEMA as well helped us out. There was a stormwater management company that assisted with us, and a landscape architect company, and they were all, it was a great team to work with in order to put this all together. And again, there were other thing was they were open to ideas and open to discuss possibilities. Not only from ourselves as the consultant group, but also with the town and the public. So they were willing to explore different approaches. So now let's just go through some of the engagement strengths. So the first off, we did an open house. In the first open house, this is give you an example with where the client was at. We actually provided the public with 3 options to pick from. In general, similar, like the residential is mainly on the west side, the business commercial on the east side. But, you can see some of the different alignments of streets, different locations for park space. And we put it essentially to a survey and a vote. And at the end of the day, this was the pick. And part of the reasons for that pick is the play fields that you can see there, where the other examples only had mainly kind of smaller park spaces. As well, you can see the offset road that kind of does this interesting jog. And that was specifically to avoid shortcutting through the Riverview community. And I think we're hoping those in Riverview appreciated that. And it seemed to, since they picked this, as well as the rest of the public. And from there, we did a really multi-pronged approach, because we wanted to hear not just from the loudest voices, but from everyone. So we had the CEE presentation that Candace mentioned. We kept a stakeholder database. So anyone would give us an email or some contact information, we put it in our database so we could send out newsletters and announcements. And I should also mention, we actually have hired, and we have now 3 public engagement specialists in our office who, that's all they do. They just do engagement. And that one of those individuals helped us set up this program. So we had a second and finally a third open house with hundreds of people showing up, well, about over 100 showing up at each one of the open houses. We had a project website and Facebook page. We sent out those newsletters I mentioned. We made 2 informational videos. One we'll show you at the end. And we had multiple one-on-one meetings with all the various landowners and stakeholders. And the next piece is the design guidelines. And normally I'd probably talk about this in the design section, but I see it also as an engagement tool. So this, I call it form-based code light, partly because it's in the appendix and it's a guideline versus being a land use bylaw. But people don't always understand blobs on a map of colors, right? They kind of want to have an idea of what this might look like. So we created various precincts, and within each precinct we identified the types of buildings we were expecting, the type of form, setbacks, heights. And the great thing too is the land use bylaw at the town of Cochrane provides a good amount of flexibility from a design standpoint. It's more focused on use. So this form-based code guidelines really augmented the land use bylaw and gave guidance to future builders and developers, but also from engagement standpoint really gave the community a sense of what to expect. So we gathered everything from what we heard from the public and from our stakeholders, and we started making some changes to really demonstrate that we're listening, to really get this project right. So the first thing we did is there was some multi-residential on the the west side of the development facing Riverview, and we decided to move it all towards the commercial area to support it and to have maybe a less of an impact on that, on the Riverview community. We switched dwelling units along River Avenue from semi-detached to single-detached to match again the character of Riverview, which is more of a single-detached residential community. We reduced the density down as much as we could. So in the Calgary region, the urban density requirement is 8 units per acre, and we kind of lowered it to get as close to 8 as we possibly could, while also making sure that the client would be able to make a return on his investment. As mentioned, we misaligned the main collector so that it would not line up with the collector running through Riverview, and added jogs to the road as well so that they would avoid shortcutting. And then for the lots that backed on the sawmill storage yard, we made sure that there was an additional setback between the back of house to the fence and shared property line with the sawmill storage yard, as well as we required that a buffer be put in to ensure that residences weren't impacted by the moving of vehicles, the moving of logs, etc. There was a requirement for an air quality test just to ensure that those residents wouldn't be harmed by anything negative from the storage yard. And then the last piece is we phased out the development so that the final phase of the development would be the one adjacent to the sawmill, with the idea that potentially in the future with the sawmill redeveloping, they might actually be redeveloping at the same time. So this was, we put a lot of effort in, a lot of time, a lot of hours, a lot of the client's money to do this public engagement, but I feel that we really made a difference through this process. We got 162 people to like us on Facebook, which I thought was pretty good. It's more than my kids' photos, so, so I thought, that's all right. And we got kind of aggressive in our last engagement. We decided to put out a survey, give everyone a survey they could fill out, and sometimes a lot of people, a lot of clients will be nervous about this, but we felt confident at the time that we were going to get some good feedback. And of those 47 feedback forms filled out, there was a 74% of the respondents who were satisfied with the engagement process, and 70% were satisfied with the Greystone plan. And the majority of response identified they were satisfied with the land uses, the open space, and the internal network. So I think we were able to really get in touch with the rest of the citizens of Cochrane through various multiple means to really find out what they had to say. And because of those efforts, I think we were able to give them a bit of a platform and collect their opinions. Now, next, I want to get into the details of where we landed. So in terms of area structure plan, here you have the overall plan. It's relatively high level, relatively generalized. You can see how we have the lower density form, mainly on the west side next to Riverview, the mid-rise sort of townhouse apartment building style development next to the commercial in the center, and then a storm pond to deal with all the stormwater on the east. And I wanted to mention the 2 future study area pieces. That was an interesting one because both Rocky View County and the Spray Lake Sawmill were very interested in some residential component as part of their redevelopments of the future. And there was some, I guess, uncertainty at the town of whether that is the most appropriate use in that location. And the other part, too, is that we felt like we might be rocking the boat a little too much, and we've already got enough on our plate to get this project over the hump. Let's leave that to a future discussion. So we ended up labeling it future study area because we felt that it might be years down the line before any of those 2 projects happen, and let's have that conversation then rather than having a discussion now that may actually not reflect a true future. So through our collaboration with everyone, we established a community vision, identified land uses, the transportation network, and future servicing. And this also gave future redevelopment, those interested in doing it, a blueprint or at least a framework as to how they could connect up to the systems that we are anticipating in terms of road network servicing. And you can also see the transportation connections we were going to establish to the north as well to the south to ensure that everyone is well connected through this future community. So our vision essentially was a complete community, and this diagram demonstrates how the different uses that would be next to each other. Also, the intent was that by being a complete, I should say the surrounding uses really helped us make this kind of happen. It almost was a natural occurrence where suddenly you have all these different uses next to each other, and you're with the intent of achieving social interaction, reasonable commuting distances, people being able to walk to destination, and people having services and daily needs within close proximity. And finally, a diverse experiences where it's not, you can walk to so many different things from the rec center to the play fields to plazas to shopping, etc. And now I'll just walk you through the neighborhood plan, which was specific to the gravel pit redevelopment. So here we're now getting really into the details. And very, I guess, high level again, we have the, you can see now where the parks are located and more of the storm water and the play fields and et cetera. So this is, our nice colorful map. We decided to do, though, a illustrated plan to really help people understand what we're proposing here. So you can see that we wanted to reflect a bit of a downtown sort of feel where you have a sort of a semi-grid neighborhood, neo-traditional neighborhood design happening. We want to create this view corridor through the east-west access for pedestrians to walk through, but at the same time have the jog in the street so that traffic wouldn't be speeding through the development. Park spaces along the collector, which would have created 30 kilometer per hour zones against slowing down traffic. So that's the overall, and I'll get into now some of the main components. So this is the business park. This is kind of our client's bread and butter. And it's supposed to, at the end of the day, accommodate a lot of the future business in Cochrane. And then we have the stormwater management pond. This actually is a depression that was, I wouldn't call it naturally occurring, but it was essentially through the digging of the gravel, it left a depression which actually really worked well for and made it the ideal spot for a stormwater management pond. And we put pathways around it as well. Here's the commercial site. It's kind of your typical commercial of a grocer and a strip mall type-esque development. But we thought it was important to have this in the community to make it have a full complement of services. We have a main street running through the development. So a lot of developments now that I've been working on with commercial elements, they're often it's going beyond the car now. They're trying to create an experience. They know, we heard about Amazon. They know they can't compete with Amazon on price, but they know they can compete on experience. So the idea that you need an experience to attract people to your area was contemplated as part of this development through establishment of Main Street. Here are the play fields with ball diamonds, an outdoor ice rink, and then the big thing that was pushed on us was pickleball. So we've got pickleball. This might change over time as the needs of the community are more understood as redevelopment occurs, but we heard and listened and we put in pickleball. And you can see to the south the campground there. Here's the plaza. This essentially ends the view corridor that from the east to west, and it's supposed to complement the main street as well as the future grocery store. Here you have your single detached units next to Riverview, and the semi-detached, which we put along a lot of the collectors to frame up the collector to make it not just a big wide street, but to feel a little bit comfortable when you're walking down it. Townhouses in certain location to frame up the view corridor as you're going from east to west. And next to it, we have, the multifamily, which is, we moved here, and I think moved it all in this location because we believe that with a lot of population in this location, that will support the main street, support the commercial, and because people probably living in those units will be excited to be able to walk out the door and gain access to services. And there's also the potential for seniors housing in this location as well. And finally, with the Spray Lake Sawmill interface, I talked about it before, we made some extra deep lots so that we could accommodate a bigger setback between the back of house and the fence that would be shared with Spray Lake Sawmill, as well as you can see the trees where we're suggesting a buffer be put in place. So that's a walk through the design as well. Now, just to give you a few stats, so in terms of land area, just to demonstrate how we're creating this complete community, 50% is residential, with the other 50% being non-residential, with commercial, employment, and public services. In terms of statistics, we're anticipating 1,800 people living here, quite a few people working in the business area at 2,900, and then we anticipate 135,000 square feet of retail. And here provides some stats on housing, with 46% as single detached, 18% as townhouses, and 36% as multifamily. And this is one of my favorite stats about the project. So the town did a growth management strategy, and they projected out how many jobs they anticipated to be coming to the town in the future. And we were able to then take that number and using some literature determine what we anticipated the number of employees there. And Greystone is anticipated to be able to accommodate 38% of the future employment over the next 50 years. So I thought that was a really dramatic stat to show everyone and show that how much Greystone will be contributing to the growth of Cochrane. And so we just wanted to go through some the lessons learned here. So we were talking about our strengths, and now we want to talk about some of the things we should be celebrating. First one is celebrating council. So council is really representatives of the people. They have their ear to the ground, and it's good to engage council early in the process to gain feedback from them before moving forward, and then just to avoid surprises. As Candace mentioned, I've run into situations before where in another municipality where the council finally got the chance to see what we were proposing after, I think, 2 or 3 years of work, and they didn't like it. So it ended up we had to go back because of that. And so it's really great that Cochrane has this process where we can get some early feedback onto how to move forward with our application before it hits council after a couple of years of work. Celebrate your surroundings. So look around you, see what kind of uses are in proximity, and rather than trying to turn your back on them and put up fences, see how you can create synergies and put in complementary uses. And also celebrate visionaries. A lot of people come forward with crazy ideas sometimes, but those crazy ideas can be good ideas, and they're only crazy because they might not meet certain standards, or they might not be what's the norm, or what have you. And then specifically in this project, we had to fight for a few things. Like that Main Street, we had to battle it out with the roads department because they weren't sure about snow clearing, for example, or there was transportation didn't like the jog in the road because they really wanted a clear shot from east to west right through Riverview for getting traffic through. And then when there's a lot of vocal opposition, standing up for that visionary when you think it's a really good idea. And I think Burns West had this vision, and it was great to be able to run with it and get it to this point so far. And then last but not least, but probably the most important, celebrate engagement. There's so many projects out there where, you often hear nobody engaged the public at all. They thought they could just get their project going through the council, no problem, without speaking to anybody. Or they'll do things where you just do enough. You put that one open house out and you hope, oh yeah, check that box. Well, really, you should really be thinking of multiple ways to talk to the public, because they have good feedback, and if you have a good story to tell, they will get on board and support you at the end of the day. And think about various ways to talk to people. It's not just through open houses, but Facebook or through websites or through newsletters, through email. To give you a really full example is that if we had never talked to anybody, nobody would have known what the community thought about the project. At the public hearing, 3 people spoke. So that was the Riverview community, one individual from the Riverview community as well, and then the developer in favor of the project. So if you just took that as feedback, you'd really never know what the community had to say. So you really have to think about what are different ways that people like to communicate. So this is the end of our presentation, but we do have the video I mentioned. And so this video was an idea we had to, again, have multiple ways of communicating our message. We had a videographer come in and work with us. You'll be seeing Pam McInnes, who's one of the principals at BNA, and led the project while I managed the day-to-day. And she'll go through the project on the elements that I've talked about. But we've done it in a way that we hope we were able to communicate to the public who are more visual in a short period about what we thought was really good about this future neighborhood. So we're just getting it set up, and we can show it. But as I say that, we did a second video as well. The second video was, we heard a lot of information being put out by different people about the project, and we wanted to make it clear to people what the project was about. So when we heard something that we didn't think was quite aligned with honestly what we were doing, what we came up with was quick facts, essentially. So we were talking about, like, really how much municipal reserve do we have? What's the difference between anticipated and maximum density? What's what are we doing with the road network? So we put out those quick facts to help people get quick understanding about what we were proposing. And so we hope they got that message across to people. And but I also have to say it was interesting working with videographers too, because they brought in a makeup artist, they got you all like your makeup on and all this, and even making you look as good as you could look, and the right lighting. And it was a lot. It was also challenging too, because you couldn't. It was with Thirst. Everyone thought, well, we'll just memorize our lines. Well, there was just so much information that we decided that it was best to kind of have a little bit off camera the script, so you could kind of read through it. So, but I think they're putting up the video soon. But maybe I'll just take some questions first while we're just waiting for that. Does anyone have any questions about the project? Go ahead.
Great presentation. Hello?
Oh, no problem. No worries. You can just, I can repeat it.
So, in regards to the existing industrial sites, did you find that there were any specific areas of environmental concern? For example, things like creosote, and if so, how did you mitigate that in regards to placing residential use right next to the industrial?
Yeah, for sure. So we had 2 environmental site assessments, a phase 1 and a phase 2 completed for it. The town of Cochrane also had those same questions and everything. So through that, we were able to pinpoint, is there any contamination? So they did point out a little bit. So there's I think a hydrocarbon staining, they called it. But there wasn't anything like was it a Domtar site? Yeah, that one was creosote? Yeah, so there's no creosote, nothing like that. A little bit of staining from that that had to be dug up and mitigated. But essentially the study concluded that, yes, there's a little bit of contamination on the site, but nothing that prevented the redevelopment. So that was the big thing. The biggest challenge, actually, I talked to the engineer about it, was more about the materials that are left behind from a grading standpoint. So when you do your gravel pit, they would dig out all the loam, put it to the side, get out all the gravel, and then push the loam back in, like without doing anything about it, just push it right into the hole or whatever. And the other thing is they had a wash where the stones, after they got them out of the gravel pit, they couldn't sell them with all the silt on them, so they had to wash it. And so they washed it, and all the silt was on the left on the ground. So they had to do some really, I guess, thoughtful way of regrading the site using these same materials, but doing it in such a way that you could still build a road over it or put a house on it. So there was a lot of contemplation with that. We didn't have to do, fortunately, bring in much material. Like with some gravel pits, you dig a big giant hole and then you have to build it up again. The reason for that is, I understand, is that the sewer line was at a lower elevation than the rest of the site. So because of that, you didn't have to raise the site up to, it would just naturally flow through the sewer line. So we were just fortunate that, I mean, overall, it was a manageable site to rehabilitate. Yeah. Okay, we're ready.
Hi, my name is Pam McInnes from B&A Planning Group, and I'd like to introduce you to Greystone. The Greystone lands, owned by the Burns family, have been an important part of Cochrane since the 1940s. For over 70 years, the lands have been used as a gravel quarry. Gravel extraction is now complete, and the land is ready for redevelopment. The redevelopment of this land provides a unique opportunity to design a dynamic new community in an amazing location adjacent to downtown and the Bow River. Our challenge was clear. How do we create a great infill development that will complement the surrounding uses while fulfilling a need in Cochrane? So what is Greystone? First, Greystone is a master planned, complete community. A wide variety of housing will be offered, including single-family and semi-detached homes, villas, townhomes, and apartments to meet the changing needs and circumstances of Cochrane families. A significant portion of the neighborhood will be dedicated to an industrial and business park, which will offer new local businesses and job opportunities. Retail services will be provided in the commercial area and along the high street to meet the daily needs of residents. High-quality open spaces are an important part of the plan. The residential side will include 3 playgrounds offering different active play opportunities. A landscape plaza will serve as a meeting place and a social focal point along the high street. The plaza will overlook the storm pond, which will offer walking and cycling paths to enjoy this amenity area. And sports fields will complement the uses within the recreation center and provide a nice transition toward the campground. Second, Greystone is all about small town charm. It will be a traditional urban village where houses include front porches facing the street, where open spaces and streets are strongly framed to create dynamic vistas, and where architecture reflects Cochrane's Western heritage. Third, Greystone will be a sustainable community. Not only does the reuse of the land exemplify sustainability, the strategic location of uses and the comprehensive pedestrian network will ensure that residents and employees are within a 5-minute walk of neighborhood amenities and future transit. The site will witness the reintroduction of trees, shrubs, and grasses that have been absent for decades. Greystone is about creating great experiences for people, knowing your neighbors, and having the ability to walk to work or to nearby retail. It's having the local coffee shop employees know your name. It's seeing familiar faces in the parks and plazas, and feeling safe on any street at any time. Greystone will allow you to enjoy a beer with the team after a game, or grab your groceries while your child's at hockey practice. Greystone will be a lifestyle. We are excited about Greystone, and we invite you to browse our website for more information.
So there you go. Any last questions or any more? Go ahead.
So you mentioned in the beginning some controversial individuals, right, who were vocal. Can you speak a little bit to your media strategy, if you had any, whether to engage with these folks in media, and whether they appeared in newspapers and you chose to issue news releases or anything related to that as well that went along with your engagement strategy?
I guess I'll speak on behalf of the town, but I think this is probably more Patrick's to answer. So we didn't engage them publicly. We definitely had meetings and meetings and meetings and replied to emails and tried to answer their questions and would, do whatever we needed to do to answer their questions. When things went in the paper, we generally wouldn't respond publicly, no. And then Patrick, they kind of worked more through their engagement specialist, I think, if you want to speak anything to that. Like with the opponents, like how did we respond to them, like publicly? Did we respond to the newspaper articles and stuff?
Right. For sure. So yeah, we never really, the intent was not to directly respond to their comments. We didn't want to start a public, I guess, fist fight of any sense. But at the same time, we did felt some of the comments were misrepresenting the project. So two approaches we did is we do our own interviews with the newspapers as well, just laying out what we saw the project as without directly mentioning the Riverview Community Association or anything of that nature. And the other piece too was from a public standpoint, was the second video. You're not going to see the second video, but you can go to the website and see it. But essentially, it was giving those facts that I mentioned before, where they would bring up things like, for example, this will have the least amount of open space of any community in Cochrane, and in fact, it actually is going to have the most amount of open space of any community in Cochrane, because we're also dedicating the municipal reserve that the business park would normally pay as cash in lieu. So we're other things like density, they would say, well, it's going to be built to the maximum density under the land use bylaw. In reality, in my experience, nothing gets built to that. It gets built to what the market can handle. So we called it the anticipated density. So we did a lot of things that answered or responded to what was being put out there in the public, but without the intent of I guess, naming names or anything like that. And because we also wanted to say they were one stakeholder among many in the public as well. And we felt if we also targeted them, we felt that it would mean that other people's voices wouldn't be able to be heard as well. So.
Okay, so we're almost out of time. Do you have a quick question? We need it for YouTube, so.
So my question is, and it may just be a population is the answer, but the one thing I saw lacking in the plan was school site.
Yeah, so we do engage so we have 3 school divisions in Cochrane. We do engage them at the very start of any ASP, provide them with projected populations. They take that back, look at enrollment numbers, look at projected population, and then area schools, and they basically tell us if they need a school site or not, and in this case, they didn't. But there was some opportunity that's been discussed as well if things like Bow Valley College wanted to move a campus into that light industrial business park area. That's going to be welcomed for sure. There's opportunities for that, but in terms of elementaries to high schools, and none of that was needed in this community.
And in terms of the developer, they were open to, essentially we had that playfield site that we identified, and the developer is open to that being the playfield site, but as well, when there was thought that, or the potential for a school on the site, the idea was that, well, we could give up that site for a school instead. But it was a trade-off, right? There's only so much municipal reserve we can provide at the end of the day. And as such, it was going to be either schools or a play field. And as Candace mentioned, the schools came back and said they didn't need one in this area, so we ended up keeping the play fields as envisioned.
Alrighty, so thank you so much, Candace and Patrick. Everyone give them a hand. Just some housekeeping items. So one of the benefits coming to this session is that you have an extra half an hour compared to everyone else to get ready for the gala tonight. So the gala starts at 6 p.m. The reception is at 6:30. Buses will be leaving the hotels between 5:30 to 6:30. So anytime between they'll be coming every 10 minutes. So you can catch them between 5:30 to 6:30. Get ready to dance and enjoy the rest of your evening.
Good job. Well done.
See, I told you I was jabbering. I told you.